They laughed at the boy buying a cake, until the man behind him took off his hat. It was supposed to be just another Friday. The aisles of the upscale Valley & Co. supermarket shimmered with polished floors, curated playlists, and people who never looked down, only ahead. No one noticed the boy at first. Small frame, worn shoes, a $5 bill clenched in one hand, and in the other, a single slice of strawberry cake wrapped in clear plastic trembling slightly as he waited his turn at the register. He didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. The cashier's smile faded the moment she looked up. The security guard started moving before the boy said a word, and within minutes, laughter erupted from behind the counter. "You really think you can pay for that? Maybe you should go back to where you came from, kid." He didn't cry. He didn't run. He just stood there, silent, steady, and small, until the man behind him took off his hat. And in that instant, everything changed. It was supposed to be just another Friday. The aisles of the upscale Valley & Co. supermarket shimmered under the soft, white glow of designer lights. Jazz music trickled down from overhead speakers. Every fruit on display looked handpicked. Every label perfectly angled for the wealthy eyes that passed by. People here didn't rush. They glided. They didn't speak to cashiers, they gave polite nods. They didn't carry cash, they tapped titanium cards with names engraved in gold. And most of all, they didn't expect to be interrupted, especially not by a boy like him. He stood in aisle 7 clutching a $5 bill that had been folded and refolded until the corners softened like old fabric. His jacket was one size too big. His sneakers had holes in the soles taped over with worn masking tape. In his other hand, he held a slice of strawberry shortcake neatly wrapped in plastic, its price tag reading $3.79. His name was Eli Brooks, 11 years old, and this was the first time he had ever stepped foot in a place like this. He had passed it 100 times on the bus, with his grandmother always looking in, from the outside, never imagining he'd be on the inside. Today was different. Today was her birthday. Nora Brooks turned 75 that morning. She hadn't said much when she got up, just a tired smile, a warm pat on Eli's head, and a soft, "Good morning, baby." But Eli knew what that smile meant. It meant, "Don't spend anything on me." It meant, "Just keep the lights on this month." It meant, "I love you, but we can't afford anything special." But Eli had been planning this for 3 months. Every lunch he skipped at school, every nickel he found on the bus floor, every bottle he returned for 5 cents. He saved it all in a shoebox under his bed. And this morning, while Nora was in the bathroom, he tiptoed out with 5 crumpled dollars and one mission: buy her something sweet. It had to be this cake, not the dry packaged ones at the gas station, not the clearance rack bakery leftovers from the dollar store. This one looked like the cakes on TV. Real cream, real strawberries. He imagined her smiling as she took the first bite, maybe even laughing like she used to. He waited in line behind 2 women in designer coats, both chatting in French accents. He lowered his gaze. His hands felt sweaty. He didn't know where to look or how to stand. But he kept his chin up. He was almost there. The cashier was a girl in her 20s with bright acrylic nails and long lashes. Her name tag read Ashley. She didn't smile when she saw Eli. In fact, she barely looked at him at all. He placed the cake on the conveyor belt carefully. Ashley stared at the slice, then at Eli. "You buying that?" she asked flatly. He nodded, voice small. "Yes, ma'am." She scanned it. The register beeped. $3.79. Eli reached into his jacket pocket and slowly unfolded the $5 bill. He placed it on the counter. Ashley picked it up like it was diseased. She held it up to the light, squinting. "This looks fake." Eli blinked. "It's real. I got it from the store on 51st. Ashley rolled her eyes. "You sure about that?" He nodded again, more nervous now. "Yes, ma'am." A man in a security uniform standing near the automatic doors turned his head. Ashley called over her shoulder, loud enough for the whole line to hear, "Hey, Mark, can you come here a sec?" The customers behind Eli shifted, annoyed. One muttered, "Seriously." Another let out a sigh. Mark, the security guard, a large man with a shaved head and heavy boots, approached slowly. "What's the issue?" he asked. Ashley tilted her chin toward Eli. "He's trying to pay with this," she said, waving the $5 bill. Mark looked Eli up and down. "You got ID, kid? I'm 11, Eli said softly. Mark raised an eyebrow. "You here with anyone?" "No, sir." "So you walked in here alone?" "With cash." To buy cake, Eli looked around. He didn't understand why the air felt colder suddenly, or why people were now staring, or why Ashley had her arms crossed like she was dealing with a criminal. It's for my grandma's birthday," he said. Ashley snorted. "Right." Mark took the bill from her hand, sniffed it for no reason at all, then held it up. "Probably real," he mumbled. "But we've had shoplifters pretend to pay and bolt. Keep an eye on him." Ashley turned back to Eli. "You know what? Just forget it. Go put the cake back." Eli didn't move. "I said put it back," she repeated louder. "I didn't do anything," he said, voice cracking. "Then prove it," Ashley snapped. "Show me where you got the cash, or leave." People in line were now clearly watching. One woman pulled out her phone. Another shook her head, but no one said a word. Eli looked down at the cake. His fingers trembled. He hadn't imagined this. He hadn't thought buying a slice of cake could feel like a crime. And then, a voice spoke behind him. "Is there a reason you're raising your voice at a child?" The line went still. Mark turned. Eli turned too. The man behind him stepped forward. He had been standing there the whole time. A tall man in a dark wool coat scarf, tucked neatly under the collar, a worn baseball cap pulled low over his brow. His hands were in his pockets. His voice was calm even. But there was something in it, a weight of presence, that made people listen. Ashley looked up. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." "It does now," the man replied. Mark took a step forward. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to." The man took off his hat. And that's when everything changed. No one spoke. The store was suddenly too quiet, as if every breath had been sucked from the room. The moment the man removed his cap. Gabriel Stone. The name didn't register at first for the younger employees. Ashley blinked. Mark stared blankly. But one customer, an older man near the back of the line, gasped. "Is that?" He whispered to his wife, voice trembling. She nodded slowly. "It's him." Now others started to recognize him, not because he had a famous face, not in the Hollywood sense, but because he had once graced the front page of nearly every major newspaper in the country. 10 years ago, he had been the man who led a team of soldiers through an impossible rescue mission overseas. Then he came home, rejected medals disappeared from the spotlight, and built one of the largest private foundations for homeless veterans and inner-city youth in the United States. Gabriel Stone had become a ghost, a myth, and now, somehow, he was standing in the checkout line of a supermarket on a cold Friday afternoon watching a boy get humiliated over a slice of cake. Ashley's voice shook. "Sir, I didn't know what Gabriel asked. His tone was still calm, but it had dropped an octave. That he was a kid, that he had done nothing wrong, or that someone might actually be watching this time. Mark stepped in. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No, there hasn't." Gabriel looked down at Eli, who hadn't moved. His eyes were wide locked onto Gabriel's face, uncertain whether he was dreaming. "What's your name, son?" "Eli," the boy stammered. Gabriel bent down so they were eye level. "Eli, did you try to steal anything?" Eli shook his head. "No, sir. I had money. I just wanted to buy a cake for my grandma." Gabriel nodded. "I believe you." He stood up and turned to Ashley. "Do you?" Ashley looked like she might melt through the floor. I didn't mean anything by it. It's just," he looked. Poor Gabriel cut in, out of place, like someone who didn't belong in your line. Ashley didn't answer. Gabriel looked at Mark. "And you? You asked for ID from an 11-year-old? "We've had thefts lately," Mark muttered. "He fit the what?" Gabriel's voice turned sharp. "The profile." A few more customers started recording. The camera phones were no longer subtle. The crowd around checkout 3 had doubled, and still no one interrupted. Gabriel reached into his coat, pulled out a wallet, and handed Ashley a $100 bill. "Ring it up," he said. "The cake. Bag it, and hand it to him." Gently, Ashley obeyed, fingers shaking. The register beeped. Change spilled into Gabriel's hand. He didn't take it. "For the inconvenience," he said flatly. Eli stared at the small bag in disbelief. It was real. The cake was his, after everything he had it. But Gabriel wasn't done. "Is there a manager on duty?" he asked. Ashley pointed toward the back of the store. Franklin Monroe. Office is upstairs. Gabriel gave a small nod. Stay with me, Eli. They walked together side by side down the main aisle past the produce, the artisan cheese counter, and the silent shoppers who parted like water. Inside, Franklin Monroe's glass-walled office on the mezzanine, everything looked clean, expensive, and distant. Gabriel didn't knock. He opened the door like it belonged to him. Franklin looked up from his laptop. Can I help you? His tone was clipped impatient. Then he saw Eli, then Gabriel. His eyes narrowed. Who are you? Gabriel didn't answer right away. He stepped inside. The room seemed to shrink. You're the manager, he asked. I am. And unless this is about a product complaint, you need to make an appointment. Gabriel crossed his arms. This boy was humiliated on your floor, accused of theft, interrogated, mocked, all because he wanted to buy a slice of cake. What are you going to do about it? Franklin leaned back in his chair. Our employees are trained to follow store policy. If the child was acting suspiciously, he wasn't. That's your opinion. No. Gabriel stepped closer. That's a fact, which I have video proof of. Which half your customers are uploading right now? Franklin's expression twitched. I don't appreciate being threatened. Good, Gabriel said, voice low. Because this isn't a threat. It's an opportunity. You can fix this right now, or you can deal with it when it goes viral. Franklin stood up. Are you seriously trying to extort me in my own office? Gabriel took a step forward. My name is Gabriel Stone. Franklin froze. I suggest Gabriel continued. You Google it before you say another word. The silence was long, cold. Eli sat in the leather chair near the door, clutching the cake bag tightly in both hands. Outside, someone knocked. Ashley poked her head in. Mr. Monroe Corporate is online too. They said it's urgent. Something about Twitter. Franklin picked up the phone. Monroe speaking. His face changed as he listened. First disbelief, then panic, then calculation. When he hung up, he didn't look at Gabriel. He looked at Eli. I understand there's been a misunderstanding, he said carefully. Young man, I apologize. On behalf of the store. Gabriel said nothing. Franklin turned to Ashley. Refund him, comp the cake, and give him a store voucher. Gabriel shook his head. He doesn't want your vouchers. He wants his dignity. Franklin hesitated. What do you want from me? Gabriel looked out the glass wall of the office down at the sea of customers below, phone still recording, eyes still watching. I want you, he said, to walk down there, right now, and apologize to him in front of everyone. Franklin scoffed. That's absurd. Gabriel's eyes narrowed. You're not being asked. Ashley cleared her throat. Sir, I think you should. Franklin's shoulders slumped. He walked around the desk slowly, then stopped and looked at Eli. Come on, son. Eli looked up at Gabriel. Do I have to? Gabriel smiled softly. Only if you want to. But I think people should see you. Eli nodded. They walked together back toward the front registers, Franklin leading awkward and stiff, Gabriel walking beside Eli like a silent guard. When they reached the checkout lanes, customers turned. Conversations died. Phones lifted. Franklin stepped onto the little carpeted space near Register 3. He cleared his throat. I'd like everyone's attention. Murmurs quieted. There was an incident earlier today involving this young man, he said. Our staff made assumptions and acted in a way that does not reflect our values. Ashley stood to the side, head bowed. Franklin looked at Eli. I apologize for the way you were treated. It was wrong. Eli said nothing. He looked up at Gabriel again as if unsure what to do next. Gabriel whispered, You can say something if you want. Eli turned back toward Franklin. His voice was small but clear. You don't know me, but you thought I was a thief. Franklin swallowed hard. I just wanted to buy a cake for my grandma. Gasps, whispers, cameras clicked. Gabriel stepped forward, his voice steady. And now he said this boy's name, Eli Brooks, is going to be known for something else. As a kid who stood tall. When adults failed him, the applause started quietly, then grew louder and louder until it filled the store like thunder. Eli smiled, just a little. Gabriel put a hand on his shoulder. But behind the applause, a storm was brewing. The videos were spreading. and the consequences had just begun. The applause still echoed in Eli's ears long after it faded. He had never heard people clap for him before. Not like that. Not adults. Not strangers. It felt surreal, like it was happening to someone else, like he was watching a movie where he accidentally became the main character. Gabriel gently steered him away from the register area. "Let's go outside for a minute." Eli followed without a word, still holding the cake bag, like it was made of glass. As they walked out into the cold, a dozen people trailed behind, some still recording others, just watching in stunned silence. Outside the glass doors of Valley & Co., the wind cut sharp and fast. Gabriel pulled off his coat and draped it over Eli's shoulders. "You okay?" he asked. Eli nodded. "I think so." "You did good in there." "I didn't really do anything." Gabriel smiled. "You showed up. You spoke your truth. That's more than most people ever do." They sat down on the bench near the entrance, under the store's large frosted windows. Gabriel pulled out his phone and glanced at the screen. The notifications were pouring in. One of the videos had already hit 30,000 views. Another was being shared by a local community activist group. And one had been retweeted by a verified account. A journalist. Gabriel's jaw tightened. He knew what was coming. Inside the store, Franklin Monroe locked himself in his office. His face was pale. His hands shook as he scrolled through Twitter. His name was already trending regionally. A post with a screenshot of his face, taken during his apology, was racking up comments by the second. He dialed a number. It rang once. Then again. "Come on," he hissed under his breath. A click. Franklin, a clipped voice, answered. "Mr. Resnitsk, sir, we've got a situation here." There was a pause on the line. "I'm aware," said the man on the other end. "The board just flagged a live stream from your location." What happened? Franklin swallowed. "It was a misunderstanding. A child. But Gabriel Stone was here." He escalated it. Silence. "Then Gabriel Stone was in your store?" "Yes, sir." "And you didn't recognize him?" I didn't. He just looked like some random guy in a cap, you idiot." Franklin flinched. "Sir, I can contain this." "No, you can't," Resnick snapped. "You think this is just about a cake and a kid. This is about a man who disappeared from the public eye and just came back by defending a black child in a high-end store. You don't contain that. You brace for impact." Franklin tried to breathe. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing," Resnick said coldly. "Because from this point on, you're not in charge." The line went dead. Back outside, Gabriel's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a stranger. It was the CEO of Valley & Co. He didn't answer. Not yet. He turned to Eli. "Tell me about your grandma." Eli blinked. "My grandma, yeah? The one you saved up to buy cake for?" Eli smiled for the first time in hours. "Her name's Nora Brooks. She used to be a teacher. She says she taught English before they shut down her school. She reads a lot, like old books, with pages that smell like trees." Gabriel chuckled softly. "She sounds special." "She raised me," Eli said, quieter now, "after my mom left. I don't know where my dad is." "Grandma says I don't need to know either." Gabriel nodded slowly. "She's right. There was something about the way Eli spoke, gentle, but old-souled, like he'd seen more than he should have, but still managed to hold on to some softness." Gabriel recognized that look. He'd seen it in the mirror decades ago. A woman approached them cautiously. She looked to be in her 60s, silver curls tucked under a velvet beret. "Excuse me," she said, eyes flicking to Gabriel. "I just wanted to say thank you." Gabriel stood. "You don't have to thank me." "No," she insisted. "I do. I saw the whole thing. I've worked retail most of my life, and I've seen this happen too many times. To kids like him, to elderly people, to anyone who doesn't look like they belong." She turned to Eli. "You were brave. Your grandma must be proud." Eli blushed. "I haven't told her yet." The woman smiled. "When you do, give her a hug from all of us." She walked away, but more followed. One by one, people came forward. A college student, a delivery driver, an elderly man in a veteran's cap. Each of them shared a story, something they had seen or experienced or endured in silence. The moment had cracked something open, and now it was spilling out. Gabriel watched it all quietly until his phone rang again. This time he answered. Gabriel Stone, he said flatly. Mr. Stone, said the voice. This is Allison Chang. I'm calling on behalf of Valley & Co. Corporate, I figured. We'd like to speak to you. Immediately. About what? The incident? The footage. Your statements. Gabriel said nothing. We are deeply concerned about how this reflects on our brand, she continued. Gabriel raised an eyebrow. Your brand and the public perception. He cut her off. Your employee profiled a child. Your manager backed her up. Your security guard stood by. What exactly do you want from me? We'd like to offer a formal apology, Allison said. Publicly, with your approval. Perhaps a joint statement. Gabriel smiled without warmth. You want me to clean up your mess? A pause. We're prepared to offer a donation, she said. To a charity of your choice. Now he laughed. Bribery, huh? We're moving quickly. We're hoping to avoid unnecessary escalation. Gabriel's smile faded. You should have thought of that before your store tried to crush a kid for daring to buy a cake. He ended the call. Eli looked up at him. Was that the people in charge? Gabriel nodded. What are they going to do? Gabriel stared into the distance. They're going to scramble. They'll apologize. They'll throw money around. They'll issue statements full of words like unfortunate and isolated incident. But what they won't do is change. Not unless we make them. Eli was quiet for a long time. Then he said how Gabriel turned, looked him in the eyes. We start by telling the truth, loudly, over and over again, until it costs them more to ignore us than to listen. He reached into his coat. Pocket pulled out a business card and handed it to Eli. You tell your grandma I want to meet her. And when you're ready, we're going to tell your story. Eli looked at the card. On it were just 4 words, Gabriel Stone. No more silence. The wind picked up again. But this time, it didn't feel cold. It felt like something was shifting. And deep inside corporate headquarters, a dozen executives were beginning to realize they weren't in control anymore. It didn't take long. By that evening, the first wave hit the news cycle. Local reporters picked up the videos, edited them into quick cuts with subtitles, overlaid dramatic music, and slapped them onto every social platform imaginable. They ran under headlines like Boy Humiliated Over Birthday Cake, Sparks, Outrage War, Hero Confronts Retail, Giant Over Racial Profiling, Gabriel Stone Returns to Public Eye in Defiant, Stand Against Injustice, and, just like that, what started as one boy, one slice of cake, and one moment of cruelty became a storm. Inside the towering glass headquarters of Valley & Co. located off Lakeshore Drive in downtown, Chicago board members sat in silence. Screens lined the room. Each screen showed a different news channel. Same story, same footage, same shame. The CEO, Malcolm Resnick, stood at the head of the long oak conference table, arms crossed, lips pressed in a tight line. No one talks, he said finally, until we understand exactly how this happened. A trembling assistant slid a printed report across the table. His name is Franklin Monroe, she said quietly. Store manager for the South Side branch. 10 years with the company. No previous disciplinary actions. And the cashier, Resnick asked. Ashley Dorsey, entry level, part-time. No formal complaints, but she's had customer service issues logged before. Of course she has. He turned to his legal advisor. Tell me we're not liable. The man adjusted his glasses. Technically, no laws were broken. But from a PR standpoint, we're bleeding. Resnick glanced back at the screen. There it was again, that moment when Gabriel Stone stepped forward, removed his cap, and changed. The entire room, frame by frame, the footage had gone viral. He turned to his public relations director. Fix it, she paled. We're trying. We've issued a preliminary apology, but he hasn't responded. You mean Stone? She nodded. His foundation. No more silence, just posted a statement. It's short, 1 sentence. Resnick raised an eyebrow. Read it. She cleared her throat. We don't accept apologies manufactured by panic. A long, heavy silence filled the room. Back in Southside Chicago, Eli sat curled up on the worn love seat in his grandmother's apartment. The cake sat untouched on the coffee table. Across from him, Nora Brooks sipped her tea glasses, perched low on her nose, eyes scanning. The same sentence over and over in the book she wasn't really reading. Eli hadn't told her everything. Not yet. Only that someone had helped him. That the store made a mistake. That they apologized. Nora, of course, knew there was more. She had seen the news. Her neighbor had knocked on the door not 20 minutes after the first video aired. Phone. Screen already lit. "Isn't this your boy?" she'd whispered like it was a holy thing. And there he was. Small, strong, scared, and still standing. She looked over at Eli now. "You ready to tell me the whole story?" He nodded, slowly. And then he did. He told her about the cake, the line, the cashier's voice, the guard, the shame, and then Gabriel. He told it like it had happened to someone else, like he wasn't the one being questioned, like he hadn't almost cried. But Nora knew better. She saw it in the way his shoulders curled, in the way his voice lowered when he said, "They looked at me like I wasn't even human." She reached across the small space between them and took his hand. "You are," she said. "You are human, and you are brave." He blinked fast. "You're not mad, no," she said. "But I am proud and furious at them, not you." There was a knock at the door. Eli jumped. Nora frowned and stood slowly, joints aching. When she opened it, she expected a neighbor, maybe a reporter. She did not expect Gabriel Stone. He stood in the hallway, hands at his sides, eyes full of quiet recognition. "Mrs. Brooks," he said gently. Nora stared. "Yes, my name is Gabriel Stone. I was with Eli today." She blinked. "I know. I hope it's all right that I came. I gave him my card. I meant what I said. I wanted to meet you." She stepped back and opened the door, wider. "You'd better come in." He entered the small apartment. It was neat, old but clean. Books stacked in corners. A crocheted blanket folded perfectly on the couch back. A wall of framed photos, Eli at various ages. Nora holding him in, some in others. He stood alone beside school banners and science fair posters. Gabriel glanced around. "This place feels lived in." "It is," Nora said. "We don't have much, but we live." "Sit," he did. Nora sat across from him, tea still warm in her cup. Eli watched from the armrest, eyes darting between them. Gabriel cleared his throat. "You were a teacher for 35 years, she nodded. Southside Literacy Program. Taught kids who couldn't read past second grade. Most of them didn't even know the alphabet when they came in. Gabriel's eyes softened. "You changed lives." Nora shrugged. "I tried." They shut the program down, funding got cut. Then came the charter schools. Then the testing madness. They said I was too old-fashioned, too slow, too emotionally attached. Gabriel's fists clenched loosely on his knees. "That's not a flaw. Try telling that to a school board that measures children like products. On a shelf." He exhaled. "It's the same story, everywhere." Nora looked at him. "You've seen a lot, haven't you?" Gabriel nodded. "Too much." She didn't press. She didn't need to. She could see it in his eyes, the same weight she saw in her students when they'd finally confessed how many nights they'd gone hungry, or in mothers who came to night classes after 12-hour shifts. "So what happens now?" she asked softly. Gabriel looked at her. "We tell your story. Ours, yes. His, yours. Everyone who's ever been told they're invisible. We make noise. Not just for punishment, but for change." Nora leaned back. "You think they'll listen?" "They won't have a choice." There was another knock on the door. This time it wasn't just one person. Gabriel stood and opened it. Outside on the stoop were 4 people. Each held a camera or a microphone or a notepad. "Mr. Stone," one said, "we were told this is where you'd be. We're with Channel 9. "May we speak to the boy?" asked another. Or his grandmother Gabriel glanced back at Nora and Eli. Nora stood, slowly walked to the door, and looked the reporters dead in the eyes. "You may ask your questions," she said, "but you will do it in our words, not yours." One of the reporters raised an eyebrow. "And what words are those, ma'am?" She smiled gently. "Sadly, truthful ones." Behind her, Eli held the cake, still untouched, still perfect. And as the cameras began to roll, the world listened. But far above them, in a downtown boardroom, Malcolm Resnick was writing a plan, not for justice, but for damage control. He didn't know it yet. But damage was the least of his worries. They didn't expect her to be so eloquent. Nora Brooks sat upright on the worn couch in her living room, speaking into the camera, like it was just another one of her night classes. Her voice didn't tremble. Her hands didn't shake. She wasn't angry, not in the way people expected. She was composed, fierce in her steadiness. I taught children for 3 decades, she said, and I learned that the smallest child in the classroom often had the loudest truth, but only if someone gave them the space to speak it. The reporters sat frozen barely, breathing as the cameraman zoomed in on her lined but dignified face. What happened to my grandson happens every day in this country, she continued. Not just in stores, not just in schools. It happens in the way people are seen or not seen. And sometimes all it takes is one moment for the world to finally notice. And that moment was now. By the time the segment aired, the video had already been clipped, subtitled and distributed across platforms. Within an hour, her words were echoing in newsrooms and on timelines across the country. The hashtag #LetThemBeASeen trended globally by midnight. Gabriel watched from a small hotel room near the lake. He had declined every network interview, every book deal, every sponsorship inquiry that flooded his inbox. That wasn't the point. He didn't want airtime. He wanted accountability. He called an old friend. Quincy, Gabriel said as the line connected. Jesus, the man replied. It's been 7 years since you called me first. What's going on? I need a favor. Big one. Quincy grunted. If this is about the cake kid and the store mess, I already saw it. You really picked a fight with Resnick's empire, I don't care about the empire, Gabriel said. I care about the people it trampled. And I need you to help me organize a community hearing. You mean like a town hall? No. Bigger. Public. Cameras. Lawyers. Former employees. Community leaders. Everyone who's ever had to shrink themselves just to shop in peace. Quincy whistled. You trying to start a revolution? Gabriel's voice was quiet. I'm trying to finish one. 2 days later, the community auditorium in Southside was packed wall to wall. Reporters, residents, clergy, teachers, students, even off-duty cops. People who hadn't stood next to each other in years suddenly found themselves shoulder to shoulder, staring at the same small wooden stage. Eli sat in the front row between Gabriel and Nora. He wore his best shirt, a hand-me-down white button-up that fit too loosely at the wrists. He clutched his hands in his lap, trying to calm the tremor in his fingers. Gabriel leaned in. You don't have to speak if you don't want to. Eli shook his head. I want to. The room quieted as Gabriel took the stage. He didn't begin with a speech. He began with a story. 16 years ago, he said, I walked into a gas station to get a bottle of water. I had just returned from my first deployment. Still had sand in my boots. A woman looked at me and grabbed her purse. The cashier followed me to the cooler. The crowd was still. I didn't say anything, he continued. I paid and left. I told myself it didn't matter, that it wasn't worth making a scene. But you tell yourself that enough times, and you start to believe it. You start to believe you're not worth the noise. He paused. Well, I'm done being quiet. The audience erupted into applause, and I'm not the only one. He turned to the side of the stage and nodded. Eli stood. He walked slowly to the microphone. Cheeks flushed, shoes scuffing the floor. He looked out at the crowd, hundreds of eyes all waiting. And then, without notes or cue cards, he spoke. I just wanted to buy a cake. A soft murmur ran through the room. I saved up for it, for my grandma's birthday. I didn't know that was going to make people treat me like I was dangerous, like I was nothing. He glanced down, breathing carefully, then raised his head again. I'm not nothing. The silence that followed was so deep, it hummed. Then came the applause. Not polite, not brief, thundering. Gabriel stood again. You've all seen the video. You've heard the words. But now we need action. He listed demands: public restitution for affected customers, mandatory bias training for employees, a formal investigation into the store's hiring and promotion practices, a seat at the table for community members in corporate decisions affecting their neighborhoods. And at the end of the list, one final demand: the resignation of Franklin Monroe. Later, that night back at headquarters, Malcolm Resnick stared at the live stream replay. He was losing control. Fast. He slammed his laptop shut and called his assistant. Get Franklin on the phone. A pause. Then he resigned this morning, sir. Resnick blinked. What, effective immediately? He left a note. Said he was no longer the man to lead anything. Resnick cursed under his breath. Do we have a statement drafted? Yes, sir. But legal wants you to approve the payout first. Resnick rubbed his eyes. This was not how it was supposed to go. The public was choosing its side, and it wasn't his. Outside, the city lights glowed on the lake. Back in Southside, Nora sat at the kitchen table staring at a letter that had just arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single note. Thank you for not staying silent. You raised him right. Underneath a name was signed. A mother who couldn't. Nora folded the note slowly, E's damp lips pressed together. Then she looked at Eli, who was fast asleep on the couch arms, wrapped around a small plush bear that had lost its nose years ago. She stood up and began writing something of her own. The letter Nora wrote that night was never meant to go viral. It was handwritten, 4 pages, folded carefully and sealed in an old white envelope with no stamp. It sat on her kitchen table for hours, like a thought she couldn't yet say out loud. When the sun rose, she handed it to Gabriel. Read it, she said. If it means something to you, do what you think is right. Gabriel didn't post the letter right away. He read it 3 times. Then he called Quincy. That same night, the scanned letter appeared on the homepage of The Public Ledger, an independent online journal known for publishing stories others were too cautious or too corporate to touch. The title was simple. A letter from the grandmother who refused to stay quiet. Within 24 hours, it was shared over 2 million times. People weren't just reading it. They were responding. The comment sections filled with stories raw, intimate, heartbreaking. A single mother who was accused of switching price tags at a grocery store because her clothes looked cheap. A teenager who was shadowed by an employee in an electronics store despite never touching anything. A blind man who was stopped at the entrance of a department store and asked if he was lost. One reply read, My son cried. Reading this, he's 12. Thank you, Nora, for making him feel seen. Another, this letter made me call my mom. I hadn't spoken to her in years. We cried together. And another, I was Franklin Monroe. 10 years ago. I looked the other way. Not anymore. Nora had written quietly, but the world heard her loudly. She didn't even know it had gone viral until a local high school invited her to speak. We'd love for you to come in and talk to our students, the counselor said over the phone. They've been reading your letter in their literature class. They want to meet you. Nora paused. I'm not a speaker. You already are, Mrs. Brooks, the woman said gently. You just didn't know it. Meanwhile, Gabriel's phone wouldn't stop ringing. His voicemail overflowed. Some were from news anchors, some from attorneys, but some were from senators. One call came from a private number. He almost didn't answer. Mr. Stone, a familiar voice said. Gabriel recognized it instantly. Senator Rena McClellan, chair of the Senate Committee on Social Equity and Economic Accountability, longtime donor to Valley & Co. I heard you've been making noise, she said. Gabriel said nothing. Let me be clear, she continued. This thing you're stirring up, it's getting big. Too big. Brands are calling my office. Executives are nervous. Shareholders are livid. They're afraid this turns into something they can't contain. Gabriel leaned back. Good. That wasn't a compliment. I didn't take it as one. McClellan's tone sharpened. What exactly is it you want? I already said what I want, he replied. Truth, accountability, structural change. That's vague. It's simple. You just don't like how expensive it sounds. McClellan sighed. I'm going to offer you something. A seat at the table. You and Mrs. Brooks. Come to D.C. Meet with the board. Help us draft policy. You mean silence us in exchange for access? I mean, be realistic. You can't win this fight from the sidewalk. I don't intend to stay on the sidewalk, Gabriel said. I intend to take the building. The line went dead. He stared at the screen for a long time. He hadn't expected it to go this far. Not this fast. But he also hadn't expected people to care. Later that week, Gabriel drove Nora and Eli to the high school where she was scheduled to speak. The auditorium was packed. Students sat with notepads and earbuds, some live streaming, others simply watching. Their faces weren't bored or blank, they were alert, like they were witnessing something more important than a lecture. Nora stepped to the podium. She didn't have notes. She didn't need them. "My name is Nora Brooks," she said. "I'm not a politician. I'm not a celebrity. I'm just someone who raised a boy the best way I knew how." She paused. "And last week that boy tried to buy me a cake. He was humiliated because of what he wore, because of where he came from, because of what people assumed he couldn't afford." Students leaned in. "That day," she said, "he came home and apologized to me for causing trouble." Can you imagine that? A child apologizing for being mistreated, for being seen. She let the silence linger. "Let me be clear, my grandson didn't cause trouble." He revealed it. The students broke into applause, and somewhere in the middle row, a senior with a video editing app already had his phone rolling. 30 minutes later, Nora's speech hit TikTok and crossed 1 million views in a single afternoon. By evening, someone started printing t-shirts. They read, "Reveal the trouble." Nora Brooks' South Side Chicago corporate boardrooms began to panic. Investors called emergency meetings. Talk shows brought on psychologists, civil rights leaders, branding experts. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. How did this happen? Why now? And who is Gabriel Stone, really? A reporter from the Chicago Tribune began digging. She found his military records, his foundation history, but also something else. A sealed record, a name change, an incident that had never been reported until now. It had happened 15 years ago, in a small town on the border of Arizona, before he was Gabriel Stone, before the medals, before the speeches, before the silence. Whatever it was coming next. The headline hit like a grenade. Gabriel Stone's secret past, allegations of assault, and a name that's not his. It came from. The Chicago Tribune splashed across every major news aggregator by sunrise. By noon, it had gone international. The article was meticulously detailed. It outlined events from 15 years ago, before he was Gabriel Stone, back when he was known as Daniel Kessler, a young Marine who returned from deployment and was later involved in a violent altercation outside a rural diner in Arizona. The report didn't lie. It just didn't tell the whole truth. It didn't mention that Gabriel had stepped in to stop a man from beating his girlfriend in the parking lot. It didn't say that the man was the town sheriff's son, or that Gabriel was arrested and held without charges for 72 hours in a county known for burying stories involving its own. It didn't mention that no charges were ever filed. But the damage was done. Overnight, the narrative shifted. Cable news anchors raised their eyebrows at phrases like hidden identity, violent history manipulated the media. Conservative commentators seized the opportunity. So this so-called war hero wants to burn down capitalism because a cashier did her job. Why are we letting a man with a sealed assault record dictate policy? Gabriel didn't respond. He shut off his phone. He didn't show up to interviews, didn't call Nora, didn't text Eli. He disappeared. Again. Nora sat on the edge of her couch staring at the television. They played the same footage on loop. Gabriel stepping forward in the store, removing his hat, defending her grandson. But now it was narrated by voices that stripped the moment of its power, turning it into spectacle. Eli watched too, at first. Then he stood and left the room. She found him sitting on the apartment stairs, hoodie pulled over his head, hands clenched in his lap. "He's not a bad man," Eli said. "They're lying." Nora sat beside him. "They're not lying, baby. They're just choosing which part of the story to tell. I want to say something. To who? To them. To all of them." Nora blinked. "Eli, I don't care if they come after me too." He stood up for me. Now I'm going to stand up for him. The next morning, Eli walked into the same auditorium where Nora had spoken days before. But this time, the media wasn't there for her. They were there for the fallout. And they weren't friendly. Is it true Gabriel Stone used a false name to start his foundation? Did he ever mention his criminal history to you? Do you still believe what he did in that supermarket was heroic? The principal tried to shield Eli from the questions, but he stepped to the podium anyway. Just a boy, just a microphone. And the truth, Gabriel Stone didn't save me because he's perfect, Eli said at voice clear. He saved me because no one else would. The room went silent. He didn't ask me who I voted for, or what church I go to, or what my record was. He just saw someone being treated unfairly and said, "That's enough." Eli's voice cracked, but he didn't stop. Maybe he has a past. I don't care. I've seen what kind of man he is now. He took a breath. I trust him more than I trust 1,000 people who've never made a mistake, but stay silent every day. The clip went viral in under an hour. Where I Saw Gabriel trended within 3. People began posting their own stories. Photos of Gabriel handing out meals at shelters. Videos of him mentoring teens. A woman who'd lost her husband in combat shared how Gabriel had paid for her son's college tuition quietly, anonymously. Then something unexpected happened. Gabriel's foundation released a full, unfiltered statement. No lawyers, no PR edits. Yes, Gabriel Stone was once Daniel Kessler. Yes, he changed his name because he wanted to start over, not to hide, but to heal. And yes, he made mistakes. But since then, he's built a legacy not of perfection, but of presence. If that disqualifies him from being a voice for justice, then maybe the real problem isn't his past. It's how we punish redemption. It didn't fix everything, but it turned the tide. By evening, Nora got a phone call. It was Gabriel. "I shouldn't have left," he said quietly. "You did what wounded men do," she replied. "You bled in silence." He chuckled just once. "Eli stood up for me." "I know," she said. "He gets that from me." Gabriel paused. "I don't know what comes next." "I do," Nora said. "Yeah, you come back." Another pause. This one deeper. "Then I'm on my way." The day Gabriel returned, it didn't make the news. There were no cameras outside the Brooks apartment. No press release. No grand entrance. He simply knocked on the door, hat in hand, and said 3 words, "I'm still here." Nora didn't say anything. She just opened the door wide and stepped aside. Eli ran to him, arms flung tight around Gabriel's waist. The embrace was short but full. Nothing needed to be said. That night, they sat together at the kitchen table. Tea for Nora, warm milk for Eli. Nothing fancy, nothing planned. "I thought I broke it," Gabriel said quietly. "You didn't," Nora replied. "You built something bigger than yourself. That means sometimes it moves without you. That's not weakness. That's legacy." He nodded. "They're coming harder now. Corporate, legal teams, lobbyists. They want to crush this thing before it becomes permanent. It already is permanent," she said. He looked up. "In people's minds," she continued. "In their homes. You saw what happened. That little boy's speech. That letter. It changed something. And now they're scared." Gabriel exhaled. "And we can't slow down." And they didn't. Over the next 3 days, they built what no corporation expected. A movement. It had no logo, no slogan, no funding. Just stories. Shared by thousands, then tens of thousands. People weren't just protesting. They were organizing. Former employees of Valley & Collier stepped forward with internal emails, some showing intentional targeting of neighborhoods with low engagement metrics, code 4, poor and working-class communities. A leaked memo revealed management was encouraged to discourage loitering by demographic pattern recognition, which civil rights attorneys instantly flagged as racial profiling language. Gabriel and Nora teamed up with a coalition of social justice attorneys and launched a public action campaign called Receipt of Dignity. It called on customers nationwide to bring in receipts from Valley & Co. with unexplained charges, questionable fees, or incidents of mistreatment. And in return, Gabriel's foundation would help fund small legal claims or local class action filings. Within 48 hours, they were flooded with over 22,000 entries. Eli helped sort the emails. He read every message like it mattered because it did. One letter stopped him cold. A mother was stopped last year buying a loaf of bread. She couldn't explain her accent fast enough. She died 2 months later. "I never knew how much that day broke her until I read about your cake." Eli sat for a long time, holding that letter in his hands. Later that night, he read it out loud during a live stream, his first. The stream had 127 viewers when it started. By the time he finished, it had 80,000 and rising. Meanwhile, Malcolm Resnick sat in a boardroom, fingers drumming on glass, staring at legal counsel. "You said we could stop this." "We tried," the lawyer said, sweat along his hairline. We released the sealed records. We flooded the internet with paid commentary. We pressured the Ledger to retract the letter. And they published a follow-up instead. Called it the weaponization of redemption. Resnick stood. I want counterattacks. Now, civil suits. Smear campaigns. Digital suppression. I don't care what it takes. Another executive spoke up. We've been warned by the Federal Oversight Board. If we push this harder, we might trigger a class action investigation. Resnick's voice turned sharp. Then we buy time. Delay it. Confuse the narrative. Make people forget. Distract them. He turned to his PR director. Run a campaign. Bright faces. Smiling diversity. New leadership. We hear you type garbage. She nodded reluctantly. Resnick lowered his voice. And one more thing. Everyone looked up. Go after the grandmother. They froze. She's untouchable, the lawyer said. She hasn't broken any laws. She's a retired teacher. Everyone has something, Resnick hissed. Find it. But Nora had already anticipated the attack. She sat down that same evening and filmed her own video. No production team. No script. Just her looking into a webcam. If they come for me, she said softly, know this, they will have to come for every book I taught, every child I held, every life I tried to reach. And if you're watching this, I ask you one thing, not to fight for me, but to fight for the next child in line. She paused, because he might not have someone behind him next time. It was her final sentence that burned across the screen like fire. The line ends with me, or the silence never does. The video surpassed 10 million views in 12 hours. Corporate tried to strike it from platforms. It only made it spread faster. Then came the bombshell. A senator aligned with Valley & Co. was exposed in an offshore fund scandal linked to suppression lobbying. Screenshots, receipts, audio. And one name kept appearing, Malcolm Resnick. Public pressure mounted. Congressional committees started probing. And one morning, as the city woke, a rumor spread like wind through the wires. Valley & Co. was calling an emergency press conference. Gabriel knew what that meant. They're going to throw someone under the bus, he muttered. Nora stood by the window, arms crossed. Let them, she said. We'll still be standing when they're done. Eli, still in pajamas, looked up from the couch. Are we winning? Gabriel hesitated, then nodded. We're not losing. The TV flickered to life. Podiums, flashbulbs, suits. The spokesperson for Valley & Co. stepped up, cleared her throat, and began. But just before she could speak, a voice shouted from the crowd, "Where's Malcolm Resnick then?" Another, "Why isn't Nora Brooks on this stage?" The crowd had changed. The silence had turned. The questions weren't being asked from microphones anymore. They were coming from everywhere. And behind the podium, someone was finally starting to sweat. The flags in front of Capitol Hill barely moved that morning. It was one of those unnaturally still days in Washington, D.C., like the wind itself had paused to listen. Inside the congressional chamber, the air was thick with tension, not from protest signs or shouting crowds, but from expectation. Rows of press lobbyists, staffers, and civilians filled the room. Every seat taken, every eye forward. At the far end of the room, a small figure sat behind a long wooden table, feet barely touching the ground, hands folded in his lap. Eli Brooks. He wore a simple navy blazer, white shirt, the same pair of shoes he wore the day he walked into Valley & Co., holding $5 crumpled dollars and a dream of buying a birthday cake for his grandmother. Now he sat in front of the most powerful people in the country. Senator Darlene Whitaker, chair of the hearing, adjusted her microphone. "Mr. Eli Brooks, you have the floor." He nodded once, then leaned into the mic. Voice steady, practiced, but unmistakably his. "I'm not here because I wanted to be famous, or viral, or to have people clap for me." A pause. "I just wanted to buy a cake." The room held its breath. "And when I tried," he continued, "I was told without words that I didn't belong, that people like me weren't welcome there, and maybe that I never had been." His hands clenched the edge of the table. But then someone stepped in, not because he was perfect, not because he was trying to be a hero, just because he saw something wrong and didn't look away. Murmurs of agreement moved through the room like distant thunder. And now I'm here, not because of what happened to me, but because of what I saw happen after. He glanced toward the front row where Nora sat quietly, hands in her lap. Next to her, Gabriel watched with arms crossed, not defensive, but proud. I saw my grandma speak her truth. I saw strangers tell their stories. I saw the power of people who have nothing, standing together and becoming something. Eli took a breath, not out of nervousness, but to give the room a moment to absorb it. "So I have one question," he said. "If a bunch of regular people, teachers, workers, kids can create all this change in a few weeks, imagine what people with power could do if they actually wanted to." Silence. True silence. Senator Whitaker leaned forward. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks." The room broke into quiet applause. Not loud, not showy, just real. After Eli stepped down, a panel of corporate representatives was called to testify. Malcolm Resnick was not among them. He had resigned the night before in the middle of the night via a 2-sentence memo released to the press at 3:47 a.m. "Effective immediately, I stepped down from all leadership roles. I take full responsibility for the culture I allowed to exist under my name." Some said it was too little too late. Others said it was a start. But Gabriel knew better. Accountability wasn't just about removal, it was about repair. And now the spotlight shifted. Volley & Co. was hit with multiple federal investigations. Civil rights lawsuits mounted in 8 states. Their board released a statement pledging full cooperation and the launch of a reform and restitution program led by independent community figures. One of those appointed, Nora Brooks. When asked if she wanted the role, she simply said, "If they want me to help rebuild what they broke, fine. But they're going to do it my way, with real people, with real stories, and with cake at every board meeting." She wasn't joking. Her first act as chair of the Community Oversight Committee was to demand that every employee at Volley & Co. receive a paid mandatory class on implicit bias, customer dignity, and historical economic injustice. Her second act, she rehired 2 of her former adult literacy students, both now educators themselves as trainers. A month later, Gabriel received an official letter from the Office of the President. Not from the President himself, but close. An invitation to the White House for a closed-door policy summit on community justice initiatives. He declined. Instead, he forwarded the letter to someone else, with a note attached. "He's a better voice than I ever was. Let him speak. Let them hear the kid who turned a receipt into a revolution." And so it was that Eli Brooks, 12 years old, walked past the marble pillars of the nation's highest office, not as a victim, but as a guest of honor. Back in South Side, Nora sat on the apartment balcony with a slice of strawberry cake on her lap. The sun was setting. The wind returned. She watched birds settle onto power lines and smiled to herself, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded letter. The one that started it all? She read it one last time before tucking it away. Below her, a group of kids played in the street. One of them had a shirt that read, "I just wanted cake," and another that said, "The line ends with me." 3 months later, everything looked the same, and nothing was. The Volley & Co. sign still hung above the entrance. Polished floors still shined. Shelves still gleamed with imported goods. But the atmosphere had changed, not just in that one store, but across the country. People looked each other in the eye more often now. Cashiers greeted customers by name. Managers listened without condescension. Security guards stopped profiling and started protecting. And in the quiet corners where such things often go unnoticed, something else had shifted. Respect. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But the days of silent cruelty cloaked as policy were numbered. Because now, people knew what to look for. And more importantly, what to speak up about. Gabriel stood outside the South Side branch, hands in his coat pockets, watching customers go in and out. He wasn't checking. He wasn't testing them. He was just watching it breathe again. "Thought you didn't do, press," said a voice behind him. He turned to see Quincy walking up with a camera bag slung over his shoulder. "I don't," Gabriel said. "I do truth." Quincy smirked. Truth sells better than scandal these days. "Weird, right?" They shared a laugh. "I'm meeting Eli and Nora for lunch," Gabriel said. "You coming?" Quincy shook his head. "Nah, got something better." He handed Gabriel a small black flash drive. No label. Just one word engraved on it, "Begin." "What is it?" Gabriel asked. The documentary, Quincy replied, titled and finished. It's all in there. I figured you'd want to be the one to show it to them first. Gabriel stared at it for a moment. Something about holding it tiny, unassuming, made him feel like he was holding a heart. Quincy gave him a quick nod, then turned and walked off down the street whistling. An hour later, Nora's apartment was filled with the smell of fried onions and black pepper. She never stopped cooking, no matter how many speeches she was asked to give or how many committees she was pulled into. Eli sat cross-legged on the floor, fiddling with a laptop. You ready? He asked, glancing up. Gabriel plugged in the flash drive. The screen flickered. Then came the title. The Man Behind the Cake. A story of silence broken. The footage rolled. But it wasn't just a retelling of what happened at the supermarket. It was bigger, deeper. It told the story of a grandmother who wrote one letter and lit a fuse, of a child who stood in line not just for a cake, but for justice, of a man who once believed disappearing was safer than being seen. Until he realized silence was its own kind of violence. The final scene showed Eli standing at the Capitol steps. His speech played in voiceover. Maybe it wasn't about the cake. Maybe it was about being seen trying to buy one. Then fade to black. Just one line remained on screen, to everyone who stood behind someone they didn't have to thank. You. The room was quiet when it ended. Then Nora wiped her eyes. It's not just a documentary. Gabriel looked over. No, it's a mirror. Eli nodded, voice soft. For people to see what kind of world they're part of, and decide if they want to change it. A week later, the film premiered at the Southside Community Center, not at a film festival, not in Hollywood. Just folding chairs, a borrowed projector, and free cake for everyone. Strawberry shortcake, of course. People came from all over, not just locals. Some flew in, some walked blocks. Some came alone, others with children, spouses, friends. Nora gave the opening remarks. Tonight, she said, standing at the front of the room, we're not here to watch a movie. We're here to remember that even the smallest voices can echo through entire systems. She turned, nodded at Eli. He stepped up and said simply, thanks for listening. The screen glowed, the lights dimmed, and as the room fell into silence, a new kind of quiet settled, not the oppressive kind, born of fear or shame, but the gentle kind that only comes before something begins again. Outside in the soft spring air, a sign had been taped to the front window of the center. It read, this is where the story started, but not where it ends. And beneath it, in a child's handwriting, I'm still saving for next year's cake.